Hello and welcome to the radiotimes.com Doctor Who podcast, Redux slash delayed edition. This little intro just to add to the podcast you're about to listen was recorded before the news broke about Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall leaving Doctor Who. And it was shortly after the first Comic-Con panel where they kind of first revealed some details of Series 13, but not those. So bear in mind that going forward, that we didn't know all that information when this was recorded. So hopefully it won't impact on what you're about to listen to too much. Thanks. Hello and welcome to the radiotimes.com Doctor Who podcast. My name's Hugh and I'm joined this week by Rob Lean, gaming editor for radiotimes.com. Hello, Rob.
Hello, Hugh. How are you doing this fine day?
I'm doing well. We are slightly pre-recording this week, so if it's not a fine day, please forgive us. Yeah, so obviously last week we chatted all things Doctor Who Series 13 after the Comic-Con at Home panel, but some of the eagle-eared among you, I assume eagles have good ears, but you know, if they don't, some of the eagle-eared among you may have noticed we didn't talk about one clue, which was the bit at the end where the host asked each of the cast and Chris Chibnall, the showrunner, to basically tease the series with one word. It's a classic journalistic move. I've done it myself. I sometimes go for 3 words, which is a bit too much, but you know. And then everyone kind of going for the usual thing. Someone said riveting, someone said mysterious, someone said, you know, like exciting, you know, the kind of usual ones. And then Chris Chibnall said swarm. And it's a bit like that meme of like, you know, so-and-so understood the assignment. I'm like, did Chris Chibnall understand the assignment? But in a way, I think he understood it more than anyone because that's actually a cool, weird, mysterious tease rather than just like a descriptive word. So yeah, I mean, Rob, I don't know about you, but have you heard of the swarm from The Invisible Enemy?
I have not. Forgive me.
That's fine. So I wasn't that familiar before either, but basically after this, loads of fans online were kind of joking around saying, oh, they've confirmed this monster's coming back. And basically it's from a 1977 Tom Baker story. It was a story about this parasite that takes people over through their eyes. And it's called the Swarm. And there's the kind of sort of, you know, sort of big boss leader of the Swarm, which is a sort of horrible looking space prawn that looked rubbish and everyone thought was a bit of a laugh. And it's not a particularly popular story, although it is the first appearance of K9, fact fans. So yeah, that was a serial from back then. And, you know, as soon as people said Swarm, everyone was like, oh, the Swarm's coming back. I think it's a mark of like how not particularly popular that story is that no one actually seems to think that that is what's happening. It would be like quite a weird thing for them to do. But yeah, it does seem like it's possible that they are going to maybe nod to it in some way. You know, there's a possibility that it could be like a reboot of an idea that maybe Chris Chibnall thought was like a cool idea back then, didn't really work out. You know, maybe they're going to have a new version of the Swarm that's much better, or it could be that we've just completely got the wrong end of the stick. I mean, did you spot this moment in the panel, and what were your thoughts?
Do you know what? It kind of passed me by because I think you're right. Everyone else kind of just said quite, generic hype building words for things. And I was a bit like, wait, what did Chris Chibnall say? And then I kind of forgot about it until now. When it's interesting. I've just seen the picture of the Swarm #prawn from space on radiotimes.com, and it looks absolutely hilarious. And I would love if that's what they were doing.
I hope they're just doing a modern version of that, like just with not even with CGI. They just got a new suit. You know, surprise role for Bradley Walsh again as the prawn from space. Yeah, no, I think that would be great. I feel like it's probably not what they're doing. I mean, I feel like there's maybe someone pointed out online that the tease for The Day of the Doctor, which was in a similar kind of thing, someone asked, I assume Stephen Moffat, you know, what's your one word thing for it? And he said paintings. And obviously, once you've seen The Day of the Doctor, that's not a bad clue because it is a lot about paintings. There's paintings throughout it. A lot of it takes place in a gallery. But without having seen it, you'd be like, what? Let's look at all these classic episodes that had paintings in them and see if there's a clue. Oh, yes, it must be this, you know, art-themed monster from season 15. So, you know, it's kind of like we might be kind of doing that same thing again and looking kind of too obviously. And some fans were suggesting, you know, similarly, I think there's a talk in the River Song episode, Science in the Library, Forest of the Night, about there being a kind of like the Vashta Narada kind of swarming. And there's obviously been rumors for a while of Alex Kingston being back this series. So, you know, maybe there's that. If it's for the whole series, you know, maybe it's just like there's a swarm of threats, you know, there's just a big maelstrom of things attacking the Doctor and her friends. There's so much to deal with. Maybe Swarm is like a person or like an object or like I don't know, like a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like an effect. Do you know what I mean? Like something that's happening. I don't know. Does that make sense? I feel like I feel like it must be something a bit more abstract rather than like a prawn from space.
Yeah, I did for a second there. I thought you were going to say maybe the Swarm is the friends that we made along the way.
Oh, no, you know what though? Wouldn't that be great? That's very, very moving. Very moving. Maybe the real Swarm was the TARDIS team we made along the way. I would absolutely love that. I mean, you said you hadn't seen it before. What's your take? What's the Swarm, Rob? Here and now, commit to it.
I think that it's going to be some kind of baddie that there's blooming loads of them, and maybe like a hive mind type thing where it doesn't particularly matter if you get rid of a whole wave of them in one episode because there's still thousands of them left just out of shock because we didn't have the CGI budget to render all of them at once. Which I think it would make sense if it's quite a big like army sized baddie. If it is, as they were saying, serialized, the whole series is kind of interlinked, each episode leading into another. I think it would make sense to have a large number of whatever the villain turns out to be.
I was wondering whether it's a kind of super group of all the insect themed like baddies over the years, like the kind of Sinister Six but for bugs. So you'd have like the spiders from Arachnids in the UK. I know they're arachnids, but you get my point. The Vespiform, the Sensorites, they're like moths, aren't they? And you got the Worm from the Green Death. Just all these kind of like bugs, and they're like we're called the Swarm now. And then they kind of like join forces. I don't think it's that, but I kind of feel like that would be quite cool, like a kind of bug super group. And maybe I'll pitch that myself to Big Finish. See if they'll go for it. But yeah, I'm now wondering, after listening to you talk about that, I was just wondering, maybe Swarm is like a piece of tech. We kind of one of those sort of fake, like Atmos or whatever, one of those fake pieces of tech that Doctor Who likes to invent. Maybe it's a company, like it could be who's doing something shady, and maybe it's like an organization. Maybe Swarm stands for something like SWARM. Some really awful, rancid monsters. But I think that's it. I think that's what it's going to be. Some really awful, rancid monsters is what Swarm is. I mean, I'm interested. I kind of love this because it's enough that you kind of have a direction, but it's divorced of context. It's so baffling that there's like almost no way that anyone would possibly get it. Like I remember when they did teasers for Jodie Whittaker's first series, they were like, oh yes, Angstrom, Epso, Umbrine. And then everyone was like, is Umbrine, this thing? And it was like, no, it's someone's grandma. And you'd obviously never know that. But it's great because it gets us all like really psyched and excited, but it's impossible to actually find out, which is the best kind of mystery, I think, because, once you've solved it, it's like, move on. What's next? If it's impossible to solve, you're happy forever, or at least until the show comes out, right?
Definitely. And I look forward to, in X amount of months' time, when we know what Swarm is, we can look back on all our predictions and see how right they all were.
They were like, I mean, looking back, who would have known that there was going to be a bug super group of, CGI villains, mostly off screen, who were also involved and were led by a space prawn played by Bradley Walsh. And then everyone was right. And also they had mobile phones called Swarm and they had a cool acronym. Like, it was all true. Chris Chibnall is fuming listening to this. He's like, how did they know? Who's their inside man? These guys are tapped in. So, listeners at home, you heard it here first. One of these theories is almost definitely what Swarm is. It's not what Swarm is. We don't know what Swarm is. We probably know less than you. Some of you listening might even know. But, if you do have a theory, please let us know in the comments, here on YouTube or at Radio Times on Twitter. You can listen to this podcast here, there, and everywhere, although specifically on places like YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Acast, and things like that. We'll be back next week with another podcast. I'm not sure about what yet, but there's loads of exciting Doctor Who projects coming up. Games, episodes, spin-offs, and, lots of exciting news. There's loads to talk about. Until then, I've been Hugh.
And I've been Rob.
And we are the mysterious founders of Swarm. It was us all along. Ha ha ha. Goodbye.